We're living in an age of censorship. Censorship, you may say, of heresy. The word heresy itself simply means deviation, a deviation from orthodoxy. The censorship we have today is political censorship, and the kind of speech it outlaws is political heresy. In the past, of course, you had ecclesiastical institutions and other institutions that censored political heresy, but also religious heresy. I want to talk in some depth about the Galileo case because it shows me how the old censors, the censors of 200 or 300 years ago, were actually more judicious, more enlightened, smarter than the gang of idiots that we have controlling our public discourse. The church authorities, in fact, were more enlightened than Jack Dorsey and Mark Zuckerberg and certainly Xi Jinping of China. I'm going to talk about the Galileo case. I have a whole chapter on it in my book, What's So Great About Christianity. This is a book I really think you should have and read. And well, it's sort of my red book, kind of my answer to Mao's red book. And Mao required that his red book be carried by Chinese people at all times. Now, this is actually the ideal. I'd like you to carry the book with you at all times, but I'm not going to require it. I think at the least you should own the book and read the book. Now, back to Galileo. There's a lot of misinformation surrounding Galileo. People think, oh, Galileo stood in front of the Inquisition and said, the famous words, "and yet it moves," meaning the earth moves. Actually, he didn't do that. Or Galileo went to the top of the Tower of Pisa and he dropped a large object and a small object, large and small here meaning less massive and more massive, and he discovered the two objects hit the ground at the same time. First of all, that's not true. Galileo didn't do that. And the truth of it is, if you go to the top of the Tower of Pisa right now and you drop a large and a small object, you'll discover the large object hits the ground first. You try it, drop a feather and a baseball. You see which one hits the ground first. The truth of it is, the two objects will hit the ground at the same time in the absence of air resistance, but obviously there is air resistance outside the Tower of Pisa. Now, the Galileo controversy had to do with heliocentrism, the idea that the sun and not the earth is at the center of the universe, or at least the center of the solar system. This was not a controversy, by the way, about whether the earth is round. There's a lot of nonsense that people believe about, the church believed for centuries in the medieval era that the earth is flat. No, not true. The ancient Greeks 500 years before Christ knew that the earth is round, and the church knew that the earth was round from day one. That's not what it was all about. The truth of it is, you don't need sophisticated instruments to figure out that the earth is round. If you watch a ship go over the horizon, if the earth was flat, the whole ship would slowly disappear at the same time. But in reality, the hull disappears first. You can still see the sails. The sails then go over. Why? That's because the surface of the earth is curved. Or think of an eclipse. Here's the sun, here's the earth, here's the moon. You can see the shadow of the earth on the moon. Hey guys, it's round. Everybody knew, every educated person in the West knew that the earth is round. So the Galileo controversy had nothing to do with that. Galileo basically maintained, contrary to the Ptolemaic system, which was the prevailing idea endorsed by the church, Galileo maintained, no, it is the sun that's at the center and the earth goes around the sun. Now, Galileo had some good arguments for why he thought this was the case. He had looked at the moons of Jupiter. He had also seen sunspots that convinced him that this was the case, the phases of Venus. And so Galileo made his arguments, and he took them to the most sophisticated astronomers of his time, which were the Jesuits. The Jesuits had their own laboratories, their own equipment, their own observatories. And the Jesuits looked at Galileo's arguments and they said, well, these are pretty good. They do push in the direction of your theory, but they're not convincing. In fact, there are strong counter-arguments that the Jesuits had, and some of them were really based on common sense. The Jesuits said, for example, listen, if it is true that the sun is at the center of the solar system and the earth goes around the sun, the earth is moving then at a breakneck speed, if you throw an object in the air, it shouldn't land in the same place. It should land miles away. Why? Because the Earth has moved in the meantime. So these kinds of commonsensical arguments were used against Galileo. Now, Galileo had his own arguments, but a number of his arguments were completely wrong. For example, Galileo thought that because the Earth is going around the sun, that's what causes the tides. The Earth is sort of by its motion sloshing around the water in the oceans, and that's why the tides are caused. Of course, we know now that this is completely wrong. The tides are actually caused by the gravitational force of the sun and the moon acting upon the Earth. So Galileo was completely mistaken. Galileo also thought, by the way, that planets move in circular orbits. Kepler had already shown that planets move in elliptical orbits. Galileo said that Kepler was wrong, but we now know that Galileo was wrong. Now, this argument now goes to the head of the Inquisition, a fellow named Cardinal Bellarmine. And I want to point to Cardinal Bellarmine because he was kind of the Jack Dorsey of his own day. He was kind of the Mark Zuckerberg, the chief censor of the Catholic Church. And this is what Bellarmine says to Galileo. It's very instructive. By the way, Galileo is brought to Rome. He's not treated as a criminal. He's actually living in the Grand Medici villa. He's treated as a celebrity. In he comes to see Cardinal Bellarmine, a very educated man, by the way. And Bellarmine says to Galileo the following. He goes, "While experience tells us plainly that the Earth is standing still, if there were a real proof that the sun is the center of the universe and that the sun does not go around the Earth but the Earth around the sun, then we should have to proceed with great circumspection, caution, in explaining passages of Scripture which appear to teach the contrary, and rather admit that we did not understand them than declare an opinion to be false which is proved to be true. But this is not a thing to be done in haste, and as for myself, I shall not believe that there are such proofs until they are shown to me." So here's what Bellarmine is saying. Bellarmine is saying that we all know, we've been interpreting Scripture, in fact, a line here, a line there, to say that the Earth is at the center of the universe. But Scripture isn't wrong, but our interpretation could be wrong. But we've been teaching this for a long time. So Bellarmine says, unless we're fully convinced that this interpretation is wrong, then we're not going to change it. In other words, we've been teaching this for hundreds of years, and you, Galileo, have shown up with a couple of arguments which are not entirely convincing. And so you want us to change several hundred years of church teaching because you have a theory? So Bellarmine proposes to Galileo a solution that actually is kind of a model of common sense. He says, listen, Galileo, I'm not telling you not to continue your researches. You're actually one of the most valued scientists in the Catholic orbit in Italy, so keep working. Just don't publish for a popular audience. Why? You don't want to confuse the laity. You don't want to confuse the man in the pew. So keep doing your work. And so what I'm getting at here is that the old censors are approaching Galileo, not with intolerance, not with hatred, not with, we're going to kick you off our platform. None of that. The basic idea here is that Galileo continues his theories. Remember that the full evidence for why Galileo, it turns out, was right, of course. The sun is at the center, the Earth goes around the sun. But the evidence for that didn't come in until 50 years later. 50 years later, there was a consensus that yes, Galileo was in fact right. At the time, this was not a decided proposition. What's the bottom line of all this? The bottom line of all this is simply this, that the old censorship, and by the way, I'm against all censorship. I don't think it's a good idea at all to restrict people from speaking. I believe the truth can defeat error in open debate. I have this kind of Socratic confidence in the power of free speech and the power of debate. But the point is that if you're going to measure the old censors against the new, it's a simple fact that the old censors were a lot better and a lot smarter.